let's talk about Greek development. So, the colonization of their western coast by the Greeks was due in part to the conditions that brought about from the Aegean area. So, overcrowding, suffering in food and water supplies, they had to correct their problems. They had to expand. They had to rethink a couple things. Trade was growing due to precious materials arriving in the marketplaces from the east, such as gold, ivory, and semi precious stones. By the end of the first millennium BC, the stage is set for a radical change. In art, they created standard images with coherent forms that will dissolve into multiplicity of forms. So, in other words, sculpture. So, until now, man existed in a world dominated by nature, but the Greeks decided to assert their own strength, the power of intelligence. This is their strength, and then why we study them. So, like I mentioned, a lot of new subjects come about. We talk about philosophy, even psychology, all this stuff the Greeks are starting to think about. So Athens is the center, kind of like New York City today, and the symbol for Greek culture and the world. There were constants in Greek life. So man, nature, and reason. Goodness was considered to be the harmony of all three. Um, it was upon the belief that the best human achievements were art, poetry, math, philosophy, logic, history, and science. In discovering man, the Greeks discovered and confronted the problems of persistence and change. Man, men pass away, but mankind remains. So, the Greeks also introduced iron and set the stage for a new age. Um, a new world is born, or rather, an old world on new soil. Today, there are torchbearers of knowledge. They are the torchbearers of knowledge, self aware, and worshipped beauty within measure. So, a sound mind and a sound body. Also, remember, they all of their art was a measure of a man. So, like I talked about last time, you know how nowadays in drawing, when drawing real life, we always draw a human 7 heads tall. That was their measure. Man was the measure. Sculpture played a huge role in Greek culture, and today we focus on their achievements. Yeah, I wrote that for last week, but that was supposed to be Tuesday about the pottery thing. Okay, so our first sculpture is going to be the Kuros. So Greeks created figures that were formalized. They were fascinated by the complex, bless you, mechanisms of the human body. So kinesthetics, how the body moved and how muscles looked, and the skeleton and everything like that. Sculpture evolved into a new representation of human form that differed from all others that came before. So, from the Egyptians, we have, these, yeah, somewhat lifelike figures, but the Greeks really took time to use their eyes and, study the human body and made it more accurate. So, the Kuros, aka male youth, they were thought as portraits. They're not of the head, but of the body. Greeks were interested in structural parts and how they fitted together. They are freestanding and walking forward as seen here in these pictures. So, another important thing that we're going to talk about in this lecture is contrapposto. And so, in this stance here, I'll go back to that. With the Egyptians, we kind of see it beginning. So if you guys notice, there's this big slab in the back that these figures are leaning against. In Greek times, they introduced this walking forward stance, and this creates a better balance. So instead of having to support on something, they kind of rethought sculpture and made the figure look like they're coming at you as well as balancing it out. Okay? And I have a video for this specific sculpture. Talk about the kore, which is the female form or the female version of a kouros. All right. So in contrast to the kouros, the kore is never nude but clothed. This is also the reason why these sculptures look more diverse than the nude kouroi. A large number of the korai were found in the Acropolis in Athens. Often the kore is holding some offering to the gods that they served, and usually they would be painted in all these different colors. So they are not seen as heroic or even beautiful. So like the kouros, they are young, hence their name, which means youth or female. Both types were produced by the hundreds, and their general outline shape remained for centuries. And they would have been painted, like I said. Here's another example. I'll give you guys a second to write, and then we'll have a follow-up video. So the Critios boy, sorry, these are getting more difficult to pronounce, but here we see a dramatic transition from the kouros. We start seeing, symmetry, the weight shift. There's a dramatic transition that marks a turning point from archaic to early classical. Weight shift, he's no longer a stiff-legged work of art, but more natural pose, standing at rest. So it looks like, he's in movement too. He could like walk towards us. Non-symmetrical pose, contrapposto, to set against counterbalance, moving. So we're moving away from archaic and into classical. In this section with classical, we're going to talk about the charioteer from Delphi, the discus thrower, the disco goalus, and the Diphorius. And I believe those are in your outline notes too, right? So we'll cover those guys. About it, but moving on, the charioteer from Delphi. So it was found in 1896 by French excavators. His 4 horses are lost, probably by an earthquake around 373 AD. The face is, according to specialists, asymmetric in order to make it look more realistic. His eyes are made of onyx, the lips are made of copper, and the headband is impressed in silver. So reaches full development within a century into a new style. It's a professional rider, seen as a victor. The chariot race drawn by 4 horses. You can see that he wears a heavy garment, which is worn for protection. The headband is also a sweatband. Head and shoulders turn slightly to the right. And there's a new understanding the functional relationships and parts. So like how that last video was talking about how they could now, with using bronze, manipulate these forms and have them have their arms out instead of close to the body like they did with marble. More things are possible with this new material. So anyway, um, yeah, there's more in-depth pictures. That's what it would have looked like as a whole. All right, Discobolus. At least that's how I pronounce it. So the sculptor was called Myron. Nothing but Roman copies today of this sculpture exist. Myron must have been great because of all the copies he made. Rhythmos, which means excellence in form, the balancing of limbs to each other made forms more complex. So the equilibrium for the figure is shown not in movement, but eternally poised between two actions. So he's about to throw the discus, and then he's also, you see him in movement. He's crouched. So we start seeing that. So Myron was the first sculptor who appears to have enlarged the scope of realism and having more rhythms or rhythm in his work. So next up we have Doryphorus. We are now in high classical. So it reveals new articulation of the body. It's a Kuros statue, but it is in the pose of a spear bearer. So in his hand, he would most likely hold a spear. Roman copy again, and has the canon. So the canon is a set of rules. Embodiment of classical ideals of the human body. Motion at rest results in harmony of opposites. And the sculptor was Polykeletios. Try saying that 5 times fast. This piece was made as a demo to accompany a book of how-to for future sculptors. A lot to live up to, right? Surely that would be very intimidating as a new sculptor. So next up, we're going to talk about Hermes and Dionysus. We're getting into late classical. So, again, talking about Heraclides. Here we see Hermes and the infant god Dionysus. So here he is, that little guy. Hermes was a Greek messenger god, god of commerce, invention, cunning, and theft. Dionysus was honestly a god of wine, parties, just all out chaos. Hermes, we see Hermes carrying Dionysus off to have him raised by nymphs. The curves in the torso has a relaxed stance, so we see that contrapposto again. A gentle melancholy look. So how interesting for us today to contemplate. So Hermes and Dionysus, just some background on them also. They are brothers, as their father is Zeus. Art specialists tell us that the face contains asymmetry. If one looks at the face from the left, it is sorrowful, and from the right, it is smiling and seen. At the front, it looks calm. So, depending on what way or direction you look at it, you get a different sense of emotion. Um, his face isn't static, so it's not, it's ever changing. Pericles, some background on him. He lived in Athens at about 360 BCE. His work is mainly known from Roman copies. This is very important. So everything that we study about him is from Roman copies. And I believe that will be on the quiz. That's a question on the quiz. Why does the baby Dionysus stretch his hand? Probably because Hermes held a bunch of grapes that Dionysus liked so much. What's that? Yeah, especially the fermented grapes, right? And there's another version of it. So there we actually see him reaching out for the grapes. All right, next up, the dying gal. So now we're in a new period. We're in the Hellenistic. Also in the Hellenistic period, a lot of what we study is also from Roman copies. So the figure is on a stage, realistic and historical, representing a Gallic casualty. This shows that in a little more than 2 centuries, the principles of uniformity of movement have been well learned. Realism can go no further. This is as real as it gets. Every muscle, every skeletal structure, every movement down to wrinkles in the skin. So photocopy, basically. Oh, shows great emotion, agony, as well as dignity. The gal knew how to die well. End point on that. Just like the video, too, though. That video wasn't really surviving much. Okay, the seated boxer, again, Hellenistic. The theme of the athletic was always present. So, like the video said, they were nude, showed off the body. Here we see a battered man showing his age and not his vigorous, young, athletic self, but he's defeated. So we see the loss. We see the emotion in his face. He's got a disordered face, even a cauliflower ear. You see, there's cuts that have blood dripping from his forehead. Hellenistic artists were appealing to the emotions, compassion of a once mighty fighter. There he is again. Let's see if his video won. We have Lafon and Sons, also Hellenistic. So this sculpture represents the episode in pre-Roman history when a Trojan priest warns them of the Trojan horse theory. Here we see them being punished by Poseidon's sea serpents. This piece is the first to link to a chain of events that lead to the founding of Rome. So this is a good segue piece into our next chapter. Most likely, it's very popular. Oh, for real? Okay, you don't have to answer these questions, but I would write these questions down because they might be key points in, take a photo of it in, I don't know, maybe the quiz or test. Hint, hint. So homework. Quiz 4 is unlocked already. Great quiz. It's due Sunday midnight. Get started on reading chapter 10. So this is chapter 5 we just finished. You're going to skip a couple and go to 10. Romans, okay? Alrighty. Enjoy your weekend. Good luck on the quiz.